Hey, assalamu alaikum. Peace to you. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching this after the live event too, thank you for watching. This session is part of the Wisdom in Nature Mutual Empathy Space live event, the first part of which is going to be a short talk from Muzammal Hussain titled Systemic Patriarchy Within Our Bodies, Composting and Cultivating a New Story in Our Lives and Groups. So I'm going to hand it over to Muzammal for that.
Great, thank you, Shamessa. So I'll just click on something. And yeah, so the idea of systemic patriarchy. Now, it's a massive topic. I'm going to just give a few drops that will hopefully open up some awareness of the topic or exploration of the topic. And also for me, I would say it hasn't fully crystallized. It's an ongoing understanding. I've been influenced from my own reflections, but also some of the work of Mickey Cashton, who's talked a bit about patriarchy. She's written some good stuff about that. And I will refer to a bit of that. But essentially, if we think of patriarchy, and the point that Mickey Cashton makes is in an article of hers that it's not about men as such. And what the characteristics of patriarchy that I'll be kind of leaning into and that she talks about is the characteristic of separation, that we're separate from, and domination. Because when we separate and other something, there's the domination has a foothold, whether that be the natural, other than human natural world, or whether that be other people, and then there's rank and power dynamics that come in. So separation and domination. And in a way, that this has been a consistent meta quality in the world that many of us have lived in. That is a background kind of quality, that the institutions that exist, there's a kind of for me, it's like we've grown up in a world where there's a sense of fear and scarcity, and that we've got to kind of rely on ourselves. And then certain groups and certain entities are not seen as together as part of who we are, and there's not this sense of mutuality. So there's this sort of competitive scarcity kind of quality that has been very much part of the existence we've all been in, and that brings forward the tendency to dominate, but also to be submissive, because if someone's going to dominate, there are those that are submissive. And when we've been in this world and these institutions that hold these characteristics, the conditioning isn't just external, it takes place in our nervous systems and in our bodies. Our bodies have been through the system, our body minds have been through the system. So in an individual level, each of us has been through this conditioning. There's the conditioning of being in the role of, kind of wanting to dominate or submit. And then there's also the traumas that we experience from being in this system. So there's that on an individual level. And then there's the systemic, there's the collective. And we're all kind of reinforcing this by holding this. So even when we're trying to create a better world, we're still patterned in a way that is the old story. So, how do we create a new story when we're carrying the old narrative, the old story in our body minds? And so in a way, it's in our unconscious, it's there, it's playing out. Even if we believe, I believe in this, I am for this, our body minds may actually be conditioned to play out in a way that contradicts what we say we are. So the role for activists, it's not just whether you're on the left or whether you're this or that. People on the left or on the right internally in some ways. There's a capacity to dominate and so forth, and work in a way that's competitive rather than more socialist or whatever. So it's not about what we believe intellectually necessarily. It's about deeper work than that. And so there's a patterning that's there, and there's trauma, and that trauma can also be activated. Um, and also, just letting someone in to the room, so slightly distracted. Um, I'm going to talk of how this sort of can play out, particularly when we're trying to create a new narrative, a different narrative, and we have this old story within us. The challenge when we're trying to do something differently, but the way we see the world is that there's a tendency that we're going to be dominated. So if we're in a group or a movement or a team, for instance, that wants to work in a way with shared power, for instance, where there isn't a boss telling us what to do, then there's this need to have a mutual responsibility that we're not trained to be able to do that. And I found some of the ways that the patterns can then play out. Um, for instance, if there's if there's tension or conflict, for example, I'm going to focus on that. Then our conditioning has been that somebody has had power over us, or that it's not gone in a very constructive way. It's been a debate rather than a dialogue. And so, what would end up easily happening for people is there can be an avoidance of having a real conversation, or that we can come into it, and I can do this as well, come into it feeling that someone wants to win over me, and it can be a debate. So I'm going to move forward into where we go. I'm just going to summarize into where we go. An article I read by Lisa Gill, she wrote about the need for an inner shift. So there's an absolute need in creating this new story for an inner shift for each of us. We each have our inner journeys. And in order for that, we need to be able to notice our emotions, notice when we're activated. I am involved myself in therapeutic emotional work, and I know that when we can acknowledge what is coming up emotionally and feel that and allow that to be witnessed, to be felt, then it can move, it can be transformed, and it can come through the system. So this kind of work of emotional, and that's body work, emotions are in the body, is, I believe, a core part of the work that we need to do. One element of it is that. There's also the concept of, in the Islamic tradition, of ruh, of spirit, of this bigger context. And if we can do this, it's a big topic, but if we can do this work in the bigger context of spirit, then there's a container, a wide container that allows healing to happen. There's also the systems and processes we can have in groups and teams that allow for accountability, allow for sharing of information so everyone's on the same page and is empowered and so forth. And then we're going to mess up. And so let's expect to mess up and have spaces where we can reflect on how we're doing, review, reorient, have space for vulnerability so we can share the limitations that we each have in stepping into this new story of mutual cooperation, of mutual humanizing, of consent-based working together. And so it's an ongoing journey that isn't a fixed destination, and it's constantly work in progress. So I'm going to just finish there. It's a huge topic, but hopefully that just opens up a little bit about systemic patriarchy, our bodies, and creating a new story within our lives and in our groups.
Hey, thanks, Muzammal, for that quite rich summary and constellation of insights. So we're going to be continuing with the Mutual Empathy Space live event now, but I will stop the recording here. If you're watching this afterward and got something out of it, please hit like and subscribe. Thanks.